Alright, here we go. Today we're going to be talking about scatter plots and trend lines. And what we have to make sure we're able to do is we will use a trend line. We're going to talk about that word, but we're going to use that trend line to make approximations for the linear relationship between bivariate, that just means two sets of data to make predictions, so that we can represent and identify patterns and relationships in everyday life. So we're going to talk about a trend line, and we're going to use it to make some approximations and some predictions. And we're doing this for scatter plots. So a scatter plot, what's a scatter plot? If you look at your paper, it's all these graphs you see here. Okay? A scatter plot is just a graph, and it has all these dots. And these dots are measuring two variables. That's where this word bivariate comes from. Okay. We're measuring two variables. If you look here, we're looking at the number of people watching movies and the number of bags of popcorn that they sell. Okay. So we have bags of popcorn sold and the people that watch the movies. Here we have homework items incorrect and quiz items incorrect. So we're measuring two things. That's what a scatter plot does. Okay. We are going to use our scatter plot, we're going to make some trend lines, and we're going to find some correlations for what's going on. So first, let's get a definition for trend line. Our definition for trend line, these are used to represent the pattern of a set of data that measures two variables. So our trend lines, we're going to use them to represent the pattern of a set of data that measures two variables. Let's look at these three examples off here to the side. Okay? All three of these, all right, so we have, here's number one, and in the middle we have number two, and then here we have number three. And all three of these show some patterns, maybe. Let's talk about this first one right here. Okay? You can see all the dots, they make sort of this line, and this line that's drawn in between here, that's our trend line. Okay. Right there, that's our trend line. And just like with slope, since this trend line is increasing, it's going up from left to right, we say that this has a positive correlation. It has a positive correlation there. It's going up as we get from left to right. That's a positive correlation. Correlation just is a big fancy word for relation. Okay, it's the relationship between two, that's what co means, two variables. We're measuring two things and they are positive. As one gets bigger, the other one gets bigger. This middle graph, you can see our line right here. Okay. It's going down from left to right, so we would say this has a negative correlation. As we go from left to right, our line, our trend line, is going negative. It's going down. As one variable gets bigger, the other variable gets smaller. That's a negative correlation. Okay? So we have a trend line going up, that's positive. We have a trend line going down, that's negative. Finally, when you look at this last one, Okay? There's dots all over the place. And you'll notice there is no trend line. There's not one going up or down. And the reason is because our trend line, there is no line that could represent all of these dots. They're all over the place. There is no pattern. So since there's no pattern, there is no correlation. There is no relationship, okay? This dot has a big X but a small Y. This dot has a big Y but a small X. These over here are all negative. There is no correlation between any of our dots. There is no trend line. Okay? So that's how we measure our patterns. We measure them with trend lines, and we either have positive correlations, negative correlations, or no correlations. All right? Let's talk about how we're going to continue to make trend lines, but also use them to help us make predictions. So let's look at example 1. It says that attendance in the movie theater was recorded for 15 days. The scatter plot below shows the relationship between the number of bags of popcorn sold and the number of people watching a movie at the theater. Those are our two variables right there. Okay? We have number of bags of popcorn, that's our X, and we have the number of people watching a movie. That's our Y variable. And for 15 days, that just means there's 15 dots on this graph. Okay? Do you think we could approximate, this big word up here, we're kind of making an estimation as to where our trend line could fit? Well, we could draw a trend line. Grab my ruler. Let's make it nice and straight. And basically, we're going to draw our trend line so that it's in the middle, of all of our dots. That's how we draw trend lines. It needs to be somewhere in the middle. If you look at the line that I just drew, let's clean this up a little bit. Okay. You can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dots above it. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dots below it, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 dots that are on it. Okay. So my line, I have 5 dots above and 5 dots below and 5 more dots that are right on that trend line. And so that's what makes our trend line. It's in the middle of all of our dots, of all of our data points. Okay? That's important that your trend line goes through the middle of all of them. But now that we have our trend line, it says approximately how many bags of popcorn should be sold if 80 people are watching the movies. Hey, we're going to go figure out now where can we put our dot. Well, we've got to find where are 80 people watching the movie. Well, look at my y-axis, number of people watching the movie. Here's 80, so let's circle it. And let's go straight across, and we're going to keep going all the way off our graph. Okay? Where does our trend line start to hit that point at 80? It's going to be right about here. Okay. If I draw that line going down now, okay, I have to keep my graph going, but we'd have 55 and 60 and 65 and then 70. So we would approximate, that's what that little sign means. Hey, there would be about 70 bags of popcorn. Okay. So, what did we do? 2 things. We drew our trend line. Our trend line has the same amount of dots above as it does below. It goes right through the middle of all of our points. And then we used that trend line to predict Okay, we made a prediction for the future. Hey, if there's 80 people watching the movie, about how many bags of popcorn would we expect to sell? This, by the way, what kind of correlation is this? Is it positive, negative, or none? It's positive. Okay, positive correlation. If I think about what that word means, positive, the more people in the movies, the more bags of popcorn that we would sell. Or, hey, the more bags of popcorn we would sell, probably we have a lot of people there. So more for both of those variables. Let's look over at example 2 now. It says Mrs. Thompson created a scatter plot below to show the relationship between the number of items each student had incorrect on their homework assignment and the student's quiz score over that homework assignment. So I have two variables. I have the number of homework items incorrect, that's what's being measured over here, and I have the number of quiz items incorrect, that's what's being measured over here. Okay. First thing, could we draw a line of best fit? Is there a trend that's going on in between these dots? And I think we would see that there is ultimately a trend. Let's see. If I draw my line right there, you will notice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 dots below it, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 dots at or above it. There's my trend line that goes in the middle of all of my dots. We would say this has a negative correlation. Okay. So this has a negative correlation in between my two variables. But now if I look at my question, it says approximately how many items should a student get correct on the quiz if they missed 4 homework problems? All right, if they missed 4 homework problems, 4 homework, that's here on my x-axis. So I can follow this line straight up and put a dot there. And now how many would I expect them to have missed on the quiz? We can approximate 6. Okay? There would be about 6 incorrect quiz questions. So we drew our trend line. We found out that there was negative. Hey, the more homework questions they get incorrect, the least amount of quiz questions that they get incorrect. There's a negative correlation. As one goes up, the other goes down. Okay, that's what makes it negative. And after I make that prediction at 4 homework items, there's about 6 incorrect quiz corrections. Okay? Finally, let's look down at the bottom. It says the manager of a restaurant recorded how many people were in different groups of customers and how much those groups spent on food and beverages. The scatter plot to the right shows the data recorded. So we see we have 2 variables now going on. I know it's kind of difficult to see. This says number of people. So the number of people are on the x-axis, and the total dollars spent is on the y-axis. First question, can we draw a line of best fit, or a trend line? Sure. If I look at these dots, they are clearly going up as you go from left to right. So we can draw a line, a nice, neat, straight line. Going through the middle of all of our data. And you can see I've got the same number of dots underneath as I do up above. Okay. Our trend line, hopefully you noticed, is it a positive or a negative correlation? I have a trend line, so there is a correlation. Is it positive or negative? This line. Hopefully you see that as it goes up, it's a positive correlation. Okay. My next question, it says, based on the scatter plot, about how much money would a group of 10 people be expected to spend on food and beverages at this restaurant? So I've got to find on my graph where it says 10 people. Right there. If I follow that up to right there, and then I follow it over, you can see it's about approximately $140. So what did we do? We drew trend lines that fit our patterns. We decided if they were positive or negative, and then we used those trend lines in order to make predictions. We predicted that if with 10 people, they would spend about $140 at this restaurant.